When it comes to college basketball, the Ivy League is a conference that's frequently forgotten and overlooked by most fans. However, just like any other conference, the Ivy League over the years has produced plenty of not only quality teams, but also several highly talented players. And as does every other conference, each season the Ivy League honors one player in particular that stands out above their peers as the best of the best, also known as the Ivy League Player of the Year. Although most fans likely don't have too much interest in who wins this particular award, for me personally, it got me thinking, just how good are these Ivy League Players of the Year, and what exactly happened to all of them after earning this honor? With these questions in mind, I thought it'd be interesting to look back on the Ivy League Players of the Year from the last 10 seasons and analyze just how good they were in college, and how many would go on to have successful professional careers afterwards. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more, be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. Now without further ado, let's get started. Starting things off with the Ivy League Player of the Year from the 2013-2014 season, we have the junior small forward out of Harvard, Wesley Saunders. Wesley was the definition of a do-it-all player for the Crimson, as seen by his well-rounded stat line of 14 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and almost 2 steals a game. He had a prototypical basketball build, measuring in at 6'6", 215 pounds, and that, in combination with being one of the best athletes in the Ivy League, made him a force driving to the basket, which is where he really excelled. So he was able to rack up tons of highlights on cuts to the basket, as well as in transition. But on top of that, he also had the ability to knock down open shots and was also locked down on the defensive end. So he wasn't a one-trick pony by any means. And serving as the heartbeat for his squad, he'd helped lead Harvard to a very impressive 27-5 record and making it all the way to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Following his junior season, Wesley returned to Harvard for his senior year, where he'd go on to have another productive season, bumping up his numbers across the board. He'd proceed to declare for the 2015 draft, but would end up going undrafted. And unfortunately for Wesley, he'd never get an NBA opportunity, as in the following years, he bounced between various G League teams as well as international clubs throughout Italy, France, and as of now is playing in Mexico. Up next, we actually have a back-to-back honoree for Ivy League Player of the Year with a small forward out of Yale, Justin Sears, who brought home the award for both 2014 and 2015 seasons. Similar to just discussed Wesley Saunders, Sears was another guy that wasn't the most polished or technically skilled player, but was able to use his raw athleticism and frame to dominate around the rim as well as on the boards. Additionally, he possessed elite defensive instincts and awareness, as he proved to be one of the best two-way players not just in the Ivy League but in all of college basketball. Looking first at his junior year in 2014, Sears put up well-rounded numbers of 14 points and 7 rebounds along with 2 blocks and a steal per game, and his strong two-way presence would help lead his squad to a solid 22-10 record, although they'd unfortunately be left out of the NCAA tournament. But then moving into his senior season in 2015, he'd have another very strong showing, this time taking on more of a load offensively with averages of 15 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Additionally, he'd once again lead his squad to a strong season, finishing with a 23-7 record and making it to the second round of the NCAA tournament. Following his back-to-back Player of the Year seasons, Sears would declare for the 2016 NBA draft, going undrafted. He'd immediately go on to begin his professional career overseas, playing a few seasons in Germany, as well as with the British national team. As of now, Sears has retired from professional basketball. However, based on his social media activity, he continues to be a big supporter for Yale basketball, as well as Ivy League hoops in general. Moving on now to the 2016 Ivy League Player of the Year, we have the senior forward out of Princeton, Spencer Weiss. Although his statistics of 10 points, 5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game don't initially stand out as Player of the Year caliber, he's one of those guys that you really had to watch play to really see his impact and value. Despite not being the most athletic guy on the court, he was easily the most offensively skilled player on the list so far, with his ability to knock down shots from 3 as well as create offense for himself off the dribble. Additionally, he displayed a strong ability to run the offense and set up his teammates, grab boards, and also possessed a high IQ to put himself in good spots defensively. And serving as the team's spark plug, he'd lead the Tigers to the NCAA tournament behind a 23-7 record and conference championship. At the conclusion of his impressive senior year, Spencer would declare for the 2017 NBA draft, but would go undrafted, and additionally wouldn't really get any looks from the G League either. As such, Spencer would take his talent internationally to Israel and to this day continues to play for the Israeli Basketball Premier League. Getting near the halfway point now, up next we've got the sophomore forward out of Harvard, Seth Towns. Right off the bat, I want to say that this guy has had one of the most interesting collegiate careers I've ever seen from any player, and you'll see why in a minute. But before getting into that, looking at his sophomore year in 2017, Towns put up an impressive stat line of 16 points and 5 rebounds a game, and you really don't have to watch him play for very long to understand why he was so good. Not only did he have really solid measurables at 6'9", 230 pounds, but he was also very athletic and mobile for his size as well. Additionally, his offensive game was pretty well developed, being a legitimate 3-level scorer with the ability to score from behind the arc, shooting 44% from 3 his sophomore year. He'd helped lead his team to an 18-14 record, which was solid, but not enough to get an invite to the NCAA tournament. Now, it's after his sophomore year where things get kinda crazy, as he'd miss his junior season due to injury and wouldn't be able to play his senior season due to Ivy League basketball halting operations amidst the COVID pandemic. And as such, he decided to transfer to Ohio State for what was technically his 5th collegiate season. But after limited playing time and being involved in a car crash which would eventually require back surgery, Towns decided to step away from basketball. However, just as you thought his career might be over, Towns decided to return for the 2023 season, suiting up this time for Howard University. And for those not keeping track at home, this would technically be his 8th season of collegiate basketball, which is absolutely wild. He'd actually go on to have a pretty solid season, making the all-conference team, and at the conclusion of his college career, Towns would quickly take up a job as an assistant coach at Harvard, where he's currently at to this day. Coming in as the Ivy League Player of the Year for 2018, we have our first guard of the video with junior Mie Oni out of Yale. Oni was a guy that was able to make an immediate impact as a freshman for the Bulldogs, and he continued to make steady improvements each year, all culminating in a breakout junior year, averaging 17 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block per game. He was an absolute highlight reel during his time in college, possessing incredible athleticism and explosiveness that rewarded him with countless high-flying dunks and posters. I feel pretty comfortable saying he's probably the most physically gifted player we're going to see in this video. But make no mistake, Oni was much more than just a dunker. He was also pretty polished as a ball handler, which allowed him to be an effective ISO player that can break down his defender off the dribble and create shots for himself. Additionally, he was a guy that you couldn't sag off of either, as he was a respectable 37% shooter from 3. And behind his electrifying style of play, he'd lead Yale to a 22-8 record, along with an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. And following his breakout junior season, Oni was viewed as a legitimate NBA prospect, and as such would forgo his remaining eligibility and declare for the 2019 NBA draft. It ended up being selected in the 2nd round with the 58th pick by the Golden State Warriors, but was immediately traded to the Utah Jazz, becoming the first player from the Ivy League to be selected since 1995. He'd go on to spend 3 seasons in Utah, splitting time in both the G League and the NBA. He'd appear in 80 NBA games during that time, averaging 1 point and 1 rebound a game before being let go. Since then, he spent time in the G League as well as overseas, and was recently waived by the Memphis Grizzlies in October of this year. For the 2019 season, we actually have 2 players that shared the Ivy League Player of the Year award, with those players being the junior power forward out of Yale, Paul Atkinson, and senior power forward out of Penn, AJ Broder. Starting off with Paul, he was a guy that used his 6'10", 220-pound frame to dominate the paint, as seen by his averages of 17 points, 7 rebounds, and 63% shooting from the field. He didn't necessarily have the most flashy or technically skilled game, but he played to his strengths, which was mostly just muscling his way to the basket. But he was also capable of playing some defense and finding his open teammates on the perimeter when the paint was locked down, and he'd lead his squad to a solid 23-7 record before the season was eventually cut short due to COVID. And after the Ivy League canceled their entire 2020-2021 basketball season, Paul would enter the transfer portal, eventually finding his way to Notre Dame, where he'd go on to have a pretty good season, averaging 12 points and 6 rebounds a game. And after his final collegiate season, he wouldn't receive many NBA looks and would thus begin his professional career overseas. So far, he's played in Hungary and most recently in Belgium. Moving on now to the co-player of the year from that 2019 season, AJ Broder was a bit more of a well-rounded player than Paul, as seen by his averages of 17 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, and over a block per game. He definitely wasn't someone you'd label as a big-time athlete, but he was one of those guys that just had a really good feel for the game and really developed his technical and fundamental skills to make up for his lack of athleticism. Unlike Paul's team, however, AJ's team would be much more middle of the road, finishing with a 16-11 record. After his final collegiate season was unfortunately cut short due to COVID, AJ would go on to be undrafted and would immediately sign overseas to play in Germany before going on to play in Iceland and most recently in Belgium. After a year off from Ivy League basketball due to the COVID pandemic, we now jump to the 2021 season for our next player of the year, with junior small forward out of Princeton, Tosin, won't try to pronounce his last name. For most of you, this is probably the only guy on the list you might recognize, since he was one of the major pieces during Princeton's incredible run to the Sweet 16 in the 2023 March Madness tournament. However, that was in his senior year, and looking at his junior year, which was actually statistically more impressive, he'd put up averages of 16 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists per game. His ability to make an impact in all areas of the game is what really made him stand out, being able to score effectively while also being able to facilitate the offense and play stingy defense as well. And he'd go on to lead his team to an impressive 23-7 record, although they'd fall just short of making the NCAA tournament. But as talked about earlier, he'd return to Princeton for his senior year, where he'd have another productive season and garnered tons of national spotlight for his play in the NCAA tournament. And after getting some buzz his senior season, Tosan declared for the 2023 NBA draft, where he'd go undrafted, but was quickly picked up by the Motor City Crews of the G League. In the following years, he'd bounce around a couple different G League rosters while also seeing some occasional NBA action, appearing in 17 games, averaging just under 6 points and 3 rebounds a game. Currently, he's rostered on the San Diego Clippers and is awaiting his next NBA opportunity. Getting near the end now, being honored as the 2022 Ivy League Player of the Year is the junior shooting guard out of Penn, Jordan Dingle. Jordan was easily one of the most talented and prolific scorers in the Ivy League, averaging an impressive 23 points a game alongside 3 rebounds and a steal per game. And he was a player that could get you a bucket at all 3 levels, with his ability to shoot from anywhere, break you down off the dribble, and get a shot off in a variety of ways. This made him pretty much a one-man show on offense, being one of the best ISO players in the country. And although he couldn't really do much outside of scoring, he was undoubtedly still one of the most entertaining players to watch in college basketball that year. His team, however, wasn't anything too special, finishing with a decent 17-13 record. Following his impressive junior year, Jordan would look for greener pastures and enter the transfer portal, eventually landing with St. John's. And in his final collegiate season, his numbers definitely took a bit of a step back, but he still played pretty solid, averaging 11 points a game in one of the better college basketball conferences. After college, Jordan would go undrafted and decided to take his talents internationally to Serbia, where he's still playing professionally to this day. And now to finish up, we have the most recent winner of the Ivy League Player of the Year with the sophomore forward out of Princeton, Caden Pierce. This is another guy that some of you might recognize since he was also part of that Princeton Sweet 16 Cinderella run, in which he had some big-time games as a true freshman. And he managed to follow that up with a strong sophomore season, becoming the best player in the Ivy League, averaging 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. If there's one thing that stands out about his game, it's his efficiency. Like, I don't know if people realize just how impressive it is to shoot over 54% from the field when you're the go-to guy for your team offensively. But when you watch him play, it's easy to understand why he's so efficient. He plays in the rhythm of the offense, knows how to position himself for easier looks, and has the necessary footwork and body control to finish through contact. Combine that with his ability to knock down shots from the perimeter, rebound, and pass, and you've got a do-it-all player that can hurt you in all kinds of ways. And although they didn't make quite as much noise as the previous season, Caden still managed to lead the Tigers to an impressive 24-5 record. Currently, Caden is in his junior year at Princeton and has seen his numbers take a little bit of a dip, averaging 12 points and 7 rebounds a game. However, this is in large part due to his teammate and likely the next Ivy League Player of the Year in Xavion Lee taking more of the offensive load. It's still early in the season though, and overall he's still playing pretty well. I definitely look for him to start finding his groove soon, and I'm very interested to see how the rest of his college career pans out. So that was every Ivy League Player of the Year over the last 10 seasons and where they are now. As you can see, none of them would go on to have meaningful NBA careers, with only a select few of them even seeing any NBA action at all. Overall, I think this just goes to show how hard it is to make it in the NBA, and that even if you are the best player from your conference, nothing is guaranteed for you going forward. With that in mind, however, all of these guys are still phenomenal basketball players and have gone on to pave their own path and find success, whether that's in the G League or internationally. And furthermore, nothing will ever take away from their incredible collegiate careers and their title as an Ivy League Player of the Year. Be sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the channel for more sports content. If you have any thoughts on the players or have any suggestions for future videos, be sure to leave a comment down below. This is HCP signing off. As always, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I'm out. Peace.